Margaret thought it was too late when she saw the small shape lying motionless in the tall grass near her back fence. The morning sun cast long shadows across her garden, and what she initially mistook for an old stuffed animal would soon change everything she thought she knew about life, death, and the thin line between them. Before you watch, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss another touching story like this one, and write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Margaret had been tending her tomato plants that Tuesday morning, a daily routine that brought her peace at 62. Something strange caught her attention as she leaned down to check some ripening tomatoes, a dark form that didn't fit among the usual fence posts and flower beds. Her breath stopped. She recognized that kind of stillness. She rose slowly, fear settling in her stomach as she looked toward the back corner where the wooden fence met wild blackberry bushes. There, collapsed in the tall grass like a thrown-away toy, was a small body. The sight struck her like a physical punch. Another one, another life that had come into her safe space, only to find death instead of safety. Through the years, too many animals had looked for shelter here, only to arrive too late, too injured, too close to death. Each finding carved another empty space in her heart. Margaret's hands shook as she wiped them on her apron. Each step toward the unmoving shape felt like walking toward her own repeated failure. Another animal she couldn't rescue. Another reminder of how helpless she was against nature's harshness. As she got closer, details appeared that made her stomach tighten. A baby bobcat lay on its side, brown fur matted with dew and dirt, eyes closed, limbs splayed in absolute stillness. Margaret's heart broke as she knelt in the damp grass, already mourning another small life lost. Not again. The weight of familiar grief crushed down on her, the sense of arriving moments too late. She almost stood to get the shovel, to find another place under the oak tree, where too many others already lay. But something made her stop. A movement so slight it might have been imagination or desperate hope playing tricks on old eyes. Margaret held her breath until her lungs ached, watching with the desperate focus of someone seeing a miracle. There, the smallest twitch of a front paw, so faint she almost ignored it as shadow or wishful thinking. Then it happened again. Her heart burst into racing rhythm. Not death, not yet. Life clinging by the most delicate thread, but life all the same. A moment away from dying, waiting for someone to see, someone to refuse to give up. Her hands trembled slightly as she leaned closer. The baby's breathing was so faint it was nearly invisible, but now she could see the smallest rise and fall of its tiny chest. This wasn't death. This was life hanging by the thinnest thread, waiting for someone to see, someone to care enough to help. In a single moment, Margaret changed from unsure observer to determined rescuer. Years of raising children had awakened instincts that retirement had never put to rest. The ability to move quickly when life was at risk. She rushed toward the house with more speed than her joints had felt in years, her mind racing through options. The logical part whispered warnings about rabies and protective mothers watching from the shadows. But the stronger voice, the one that had spent decades caring for others, silenced every concern with one truth: that baby was dying, and she was its only hope. Margaret rushed through her back door and grabbed an old blue beach towel, then filled a basket with supplies, a heating pad, clean dish towels, water. At the kitchen counter, her heart racing, she called the County Wildlife Rescue Center. Wildlife Rescue. This is Robert. I found a bobcat baby, Margaret said, words pouring out. It's barely breathing. I think it's dying, but it's still alive. What should I do? After a pause, Robert's voice became serious as she explained the situation. Don't try to feed it anything. Wrap it gently in something warm, but touch it as little as possible. We're 40 minutes away, but I need to warn you. If this baby has been away from its mother for more than a day or two, survival chances are very low. Back outside, the baby lay exactly as she had left it. Its fur wasn't just matted, but filthy, showing it had been alone for days. Its tiny paws were tucked under its body, trying to keep warm. Most heartbreaking were its closed eyes with quick eyelid movements, showing some awareness struggling to stay. Margaret carefully slid the towel under the small body. The creature was surprisingly light, all fur and delicate bones with little muscle remaining. As she lifted it, she felt the worrying coldness through the fur and noticed how its head hung with boneless tiredness. "Okay, little one," she whispered. "Let's get you warm." Inside, Margaret made a temporary nest on her kitchen table. She plugged in the heating pad, set it to low, checked the temperature, then gently laid the wrapped baby on top. The difference struck her. Her bright, familiar kitchen, now working as a wildlife hospital for a creature that belonged in deep woods. The baby's breathing stayed shallow, but seemed better from being out of the cool morning air. Margaret found herself holding her breath each time the tiny chest stopped, releasing it only at the next faint rise and fall. Following motherly instinct, she began gently rubbing the baby's limbs through the towel, using circular movements she had once used to comfort her fussy daughter. The steady motion gave them both something to focus on. 20 minutes in, something shifted. The breathing seemed deeper and Margaret felt more warmth from the small body. Then, as she watched with the focus of seeing a miracle, its eyes opened slightly, not fully, but enough to show dark pupils that seemed to look at her face before closing again. "That's right," she whispered, voice thick with unexpected feeling. "Stay with me. Help is coming." The wildlife rescue team arrived right on time. Robert stepped out of a dusty pickup with a younger woman carrying a metal transport cage and veterinary bag. Both had the calm way of people used to emergency calls. But their faces grew serious as Margaret led them to her kitchen. "You did exactly the right thing," Robert said quietly, checking the baby without disturbing it. "This little guy is severely cold and dehydrated, but responding to warmth is promising." Sarah, a licensed wildlife rehabilitator, prepared a tiny force setup while explaining their next steps. "We need to get him to Dr. Harrison right away. She's the only vet in the county certified for wild bobcats, and she's waiting." Margaret watched them carefully move the baby to their transport cage, lined with warming blankets and equipped with heating elements. Their professional skill was both comforting and sad. A reminder that while this felt uniquely special to her, it was part of their regular work. "Can I come with you?" The words surprised even her. She had never been one to push herself where she didn't belong. But going back to her garden after this felt impossible. Robert and Sarah exchanged glances. "It's not usual," Robert began. "But Dr. Harrison allows exceptions for people who find animals in critical condition." Margaret followed the rescue vehicle through winding back roads to a converted farmhouse clinic, her watchfulness a silent prayer for the baby's fragile life. Dr. Harrison, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and skilled hands, worked in a treatment room that felt more like a country kitchen than a medical facility. "Severe dehydration, hypothermia, and starvation," she confirmed. "This baby has been alone for at least 3 days. At this age, they're completely dependent on maternal care." Margaret's throat tightened as she watched Dr. Harrison insert a tiny foreneedle and begin administering warmed fluids. "The next few hours are critical. We need to slowly normalize his temperature while addressing dehydration." Margaret sat beside the treatment table, watching monitor numbers swing between hope and fear as the baby fought for life. Then it happened. The baby's eyes opened. Not the brief flutter she had seen in her kitchen, but a full, surprising awakening. Clear amber eyes that cut through the clinical coldness of the room like lightning. For a heart-stopping moment, those eyes found Margaret's face and held it with a strength that sent electricity racing down her spine. This wasn't just consciousness returning. This was recognition. Understanding. A wild creature looking directly at the woman who had refused to let it die and saying without words, "I see you. I know what you did." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. Tears she'd been holding back for hours broke free, streaming down her cheeks as something deep and nameless passed between them. In that locked look was everything: gratitude, defiance, the fierce will to live that she had helped bring back to life. "There you are," she whispered, her voice breaking with the weight of seeing a miracle. "Welcome back." The baby held her eyes for one more electric second, then blinked slowly, a gesture so purposeful it felt like a blessing. Dr. Harrison's hands stopped on her instruments, even she caught breathless by the moment's power. "That's the turning point," the veterinarian said softly, wonder creeping into her professional calm. "That's when we stop hoping and start believing." As if called by her words, the baby made his first real sound. Not the desperate cry of near death, but a small, demanding sound that filled the room with defiant life. The sound of a creature who had looked into death and chosen to climb back out. "What happens now?" Margaret asked, afraid to hear the answer. She had become unexpectedly invested in this creature's future. Dr. Harrison prepared a syringe of specialized milk substitute. "Now we see if he remembers how to eat." The moment of truth came as she offered the syringe to the baby's mouth. For seconds, nothing happened. Then the small pink tongue emerged and began lapping formula, slowly at first, then with growing eagerness. This was the beginning of hope. 3 weeks later, Margaret stood outside the Mountain View Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. She had made this drive 6 times since Ranger, officially named by staff, had been moved after initial recovery. Each visit showed remarkable progress, but today felt different. "He's ready," Sarah had said simply over the phone. "Ranger is ready to show you what you saved." Through one-way glass, Margaret could see Ranger in his large outdoor enclosure. The change was miraculous. He had grown a lot, his coat thick and shiny with distinctive juvenile bobcat spots. His movements were smooth and confident, showing natural grace. But his eyes struck her most. No longer the dull, barely focused look of near death, but bright and alert with intelligent caution. "Watch this," Sarah whispered, picking up a fishing rod toy with feathers. She moved it along the fence line, and Ranger changed into focused hunting energy. His ears turned forward, body dropped into perfect hunting position, eyes locked onto the target. Then Ranger jumped across the enclosure in leaps covering 15 feet in seconds. The pounce was perfect beauty. A perfect curve ending with Ranger catching the toy while his back legs kicked in instinctive rabbit-killing motion. He wrestled his prey with fierce focus. Every movement showing successful rehabilitation. "That's what you saved," Sarah said quietly. "Not just his life, but his wildness, his ability to be exactly what nature intended." Margaret felt tears streaming down her face. Joy, relief, and something deeper she couldn't name. This moment completed a circle that began with her choice not to walk away from seeming hopelessness. "When will he be released?" Margaret asked, though part of her wasn't ready for the answer. "Next week. One more health check, but he's shown all necessary survival skills." We'll release him about 5 miles from where you found him in good habitat away from major roads." Margaret nodded, understanding this was always how the story was meant to end. Ranger belonged in the wild. Success would be measured not by continued human contact, but by his disappearance back into the natural world. As if sensing this moment's importance, Ranger looked directly at the observation window. For several heartbeats, his amber eyes seemed to meet Margaret's through glass, not with desperate recognition from their first meeting, but with something like understanding. A wild creature briefly touching awareness with the human who had been his bridge back to life. Then, with typical independence, Ranger turned away and walked to his sunny spot, dismissing the human world for an afternoon nap. It was perfect. Exactly the healthy indifference that would serve him well. In 15 years of wildlife rehabilitation, Sarah said as they walked to the parking area, Ranger's recovery is one of the most complete I've seen. You didn't just save his life that morning. You gave him back his future. Margaret drove home through winding mountain roads as sunset painted the sky golden pink. Her garden would never look quite the same. Every morning tending tomatoes, she would remember the spot where she had almost walked away from a miracle. Soon, Ranger would be walking through mountain forests, hunting beneath starlit skies, living the wild, independent life that had almost ended before it began. But Ranger had taught her something profound. Sometimes the most important thing to nurture is courage to act when life hangs in the balance, even when outcomes stay uncertain. Ranger would return to the wild, but his gift would stay rooted in her heart like the strongest perennial, blooming new each season. Did you enjoy this story? If you found a dying wild animal in your garden, would you try to save it even if survival seemed impossible? Yes or no? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.